We're now going to talk about the mind. All right, good. Okay, so here we are together. So sitting here for 90 minutes, going through the path to enlightenment, probably for the 4 millionth time, but every time we hear it a bit better. That's what practice is. So we think we're going to do this because we want to locate the tools in it, the advice in it, that we can put into practice to help us develop our amazing potential, so that we can then be of benefit to others, because we realize we're all in the same boat. So think that's why we're listening to these teachings, and we can sing it in our little prayer. Sangye chadang soke chognam la janchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chonyen gi personam ki jola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la janchu baru dagni kyapsu chi Dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, rola penche sangye dropa shog. Sangye charan soke chognam la, jangshu badu dagni kyapsu chi. Dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, rola penche sangye dropa shog. All right. Okay. So the goal here, the long-term goal, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, always aspire for the long-term goal, to do what's most beneficial, which means the long term. And of course, that goal is Buddhahood, Buddha, Sangye, rid of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness. This is what Buddha has found to be our potential. This is the point of all of this information, to achieve that. So obviously, if you have a long-term goal, all your short-term goals get achieved on the way, isn't it? So if you want to go from, if I want to go from Santa Fe to New York, what's the point of aiming to get to the next city? Then I've got to get off the aeroplane, get on the aeroplane again, remotivate, get another air ticket. Why not get a ticket all the way to New York, and I stop on the way to all the other things? So our short-term goals all get achieved. We shouldn't worry, So aiming for the long term is very wise. And then this is the point too. It's very simple. That if I am heading to New York, let's say I have to walk. Obviously, you keep in mind your goal. If you forget your goal, then you don't know where to go. You think about this. It's very logical. If you're walking on a street, okay, if you want to go out for a Sunday walk and look at the sky, that's different. But if you're on a road, then obviously there's, usually you have a goal, there's a place you're going to. So here we're going to Buddhahood. So if I'm going to New York, I have to first know I have to have the map. It's pretty obvious. If I'm going to walk to New York, I need the map. The goal is New York. The goal isn't to look at the sky. The goal isn't to just have a nice time. That could be part of the short term. The goal is New York. So it's logical. Every step I take on that path has to get me to New York. Otherwise, it'd be very silly, wouldn't you? You wouldn't go backwards. You wouldn't choose a street because it looks cute. Then you forget your goal. It's very clear. It's very obvious. We know this in life. So here, the goal is Buddhahood. So when we know what that means this is our motivation. Now I'm getting a bit long. If we know that means ridding the mind of all the misconceptions, all the ego, all the confusion, all the limitations, all the suffering, and then we know that it also means developing to perfection all the goodness and the wisdom, then obviously if that's the goal, it tells us right there, instantaneously, it tells us the method. It tells us the steps we should take. It's very helpful. So that means everything we do, if we're Buddhists and we're aiming for that goal, everything we think and do and say, which means every step we take, logically should get us to that goal. So this is what keeps you grounded. It's what keeps you, that's what your map is. Am I going in the right direction? Check your map. Will this get me to New York? It's very simple, but we forget it when it comes to these types of things. We don't even have a goal mostly, So our goal is to get that to there, but what comes on the way is happiness. What comes on the way is freedom from suffering. What comes on the way is all your short-term goals as well. So you can not feel like you're missing out on anything, So that's just a bit explaining. And now we just did sing the prayer, didn't we? We sang the prayer, yeah. Okay, so therefore, we did last week, we said the first stages of the steps mainly are to focus on the body and the speech. There's no discussion much about the mind It's mainly controlling the servants of the mind, because they're the ones that do all the problem. They're the ones that create the problems, the speech and the body. So that's all. The first scope was all about controlling the body and speech, abiding by the laws of karma, understanding Buddha's view that whatever we think and do and say produces the person we become. So if we want to become this person at the end, free of the rubbish and full of the goodness, then obviously that will determine the actions we do with our body and speech. So bare minimum at the beginning, it's not even like go off and help people yet. That's too advanced. It's stop harming them. First start, stop harming, stop harming. That's the first level. So now having disciplined, having harnessed our body and speech to some degree, that's the plan. We now get to what drives the body and speech. And this is the second. We go to high school, and now this is where we get to the mind. And this is where we get to the actual being a Buddhist, quote unquote. Ethics. The first one is, broadly speaking, ethics, And of course, what drives the practice of ethics from the Buddhist perspective is you not wanting suffering. Not just wanting to be a nice person, not wanting suffering. Now we get to the actual thing that drives that behavior. And that's the mind. So the ethics is shared by any good person on the planet. Good communists, good Australian Aboriginals, good Christians, good Muslims will all behave nicely and not harm others. That's shared. Maybe the view of karma is different, but the principle of good ethics is pretty similar to anybody. Now here, this is a unique approach, Buddha's unique approach. His very specific explanation of the mind. This is the central part of the Buddhist approach to life. In fact, the Buddha would say very comfortably, everything comes down to the mind. Everything is created by the mind, including universes, including the hell realms, the spirit realms, the God realms, the human realms, the formless realms, the form realms, and including Buddhahood. The main player in that is the mind. So it's kind of intense, kind of important, kind of serious, kind of central. So we'd better understand it, particularly if we remember the etymology of Sangye. I keep telling people the etymology of the word Buddha, but I was mistaken. Someone pointed out my mistake. It's the Sanskrit word has another meaning, but the Tibetan word, Sangye, that has the implication, the etymology of freedom from the rubbish and the developed to perfection of the goodness. So if that's the goal, then immediately it tells us what we should do with our mind. We have to then learn to identify what's in our mind. So that's I don't know what I don't remember really. The approach we use in the West is kind of includes lots of other things as well. When we look into our mind, we also look into what our mother did and what our father did in the external world and the conditions we live in, which is important. But this view of the Buddhist about the mind is very, very focused, very, very directed at the mind itself. Not the brain, that's not his expertise, but on the subjective, non-physical, cognitive, experiential process itself of all the millions of thoughts and feelings and emotions. We have to start sorting them out. And then learning essentially to distinguish between the neurotic, disturbing, delusional, distressing ones and lessening those because they're the source of the pain, and identifying the positive ones, at least identifying right now. The real work of growing the positive ones comes in the next scope, next week. But here already we can see they're playing a role, but it's mainly still focusing on identifying the rubbish and harnessing it, calming it down, not following those. This is the actual job of being a Buddhist, actually. So we don't know the mind. If we haven't studied the contents of our mind, if we don't know what is in the mind, we don't know how to identify, then how can we practice, So if something doesn't work, something simple, like, a table that you've got, it's just not working. Now, well, the table is made of parts. It's not mystical. And you have to identify the different parts. So there are screws, the bits of wood, and so on and so forth. So then if it's not working, it'll take you not too long to identify the parts that aren't doing their job properly. So then you fix it. But if you just say, oh, my table wobbles, my wretched table wobbles, I don't know what to do with my table, it wobbles. You'll never get anywhere. For 1,000 years, your table will wobble. You've got to identify the problem, home in and identify the problem. Then you identify the cause of the problem and then you fix it. Well, it's the same with your mind, Same with your mind. And this is why this is where it's a tremendously difficult job, because we are so caught up with identifying the problem out there, which is fine. We need to do that. But the real job is to identify the problem in the mind. But we forget that. We totally, because we even think the main causes of the misery are in the outside world. That's our biggest problem. So we will never get to the actual problem, which is the mind. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. It doesn't mean that good things don't happen. It doesn't mean they don't play a tremendously powerful role in our lives. But the key player, the main player, is what goes on in our mind. That's it, So there's another word. So what is mind? So what is the mind? But what's a table? Your table wobbles. What's a table? So then we explain. So what is the mind? We give a definition. Well, the mind, every definition has two parts. What's a cup? A thermos. It's this flat bottom. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. It's a flat-bottomed metal container. That's good enough. You can see. But you don't really know what it is yet. So the second part tells you, and this is a tremendously powerful point, because this gets us to understand how we get to find it when we get to understand emptiness later in the next week. We have to understand this. What is its function? What does it do? In fact, what is its meaning? What does it mean? What is the meaning of that flat-bottomed metal thing there, And it's a totally important point. What is its meaning? Well, it keeps my tea warm. That's its meaning. That's its function. That's its purpose. That tells you what it is. Now you tick the box. You know what it is. There's more than that to establish actually that it is that validly, but that's good enough start. So what's the mind? Well, this is the Buddha's analysis, and this is the Buddha's view of the mind, his definition. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics, but the way they say it is that which is clear. Well, don't get all carried away there. It just simply means that which is not physical. That's what it means. Or they say that which is luminous. That sounds very exciting. We like that. It's all lovely, but it just means that which is not physical. It's a huge point. That's its conventional characteristics, as surprising as it is to us. It's not physical. Now, but it doesn't tell us what it is. Space is not physical too. So what's its job? And this is the point. What is the job of the mind? Well, the job of the mind is to cognize, to be aware, to know. These are all synonyms. They're all verbs that mean the same thing. The job of mind is to cognize. So you go, oh, really? What's that got to do with the price of fish? Then you ask the Buddha, cognize what, please, Buddha? Know what? Be aware of what? And he will say, that which exists. That's it, that which exists. And why does he tell us that? Because he's identified, from looking at his own mind, he's identified that there are many, many, many components of the mind, the parts of the mind, the thoughts, mind made up of thoughts, the mental consciousness, at least, the mental consciousness. There are many parts of our mind that actually are mind. They are cognizing, but what they cognize doesn't exist. It's very simple. It doesn't exist. So what does that mean? That's really puzzling. Well, that's where he divides all the contents of our mind. The first two components are those that are neurotic, delusional, disturbing, distressing. They have this quality of being disturbing and painful, the emotional ones, but they have their key characteristic is that they are misconceptions. We've got to track back a bit here. More broadly, we understand the mind in Buddhism. We know when we study the epistemological model, we learn that it functions in two ways. There's different ways of dividing, but this particular way, we have sensory consciousness. And then we have mental consciousness. So understanding this distinction is absolutely fundamental to developing your practice and to understand our experiences and how we make a mess of our lives, So sensory consciousness, I've done this many times. I use the same example every time. Our sensory consciousness, which we give tremendous power to, because it's the first level of our ability to cognize, isn't it? We wake up in the morning and the first thing we feel is our body, Physical. So we have physical body, which is not the mind. Then we have our sensory consciousness. Consciousness is another word for mind. And there's that level of consciousness, that level of capacity for cognition is inextricably linked to the body. So we have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, tactile consciousness, ear consciousness, 5, isn't it? We know these. So the point about the sensory consciousnesses is that they have they're profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. We make them the boss, as Lama Yeshe says. We are totally dominated by our physical sensory experiences. So dominated. And as we can understand why, because we're living at the grossest level of our life is that we live at the level of the senses. As soon as we open our eyes, as soon as we open our ears, we have objects of the senses, you know. So the level of cognition of the 5 senses, shockingly to hear it, they're profoundly limited. So eye consciousness, the same example I use every time, I'll point to this cup and I'll say, wow, that's a really pretty cup. And we all will assume, won't we, that my eye consciousness is seeing a thing called a pretty cup, that the object of that cognition is a pretty cup, that I'm cognizing, the object I'm cognizing is a pretty cup. Well, no, Buddha says. That is a cup, yeah. We can even say it's pretty. It might have won the best cup show in the show, you know, the blue ribbon for prettiest cups. But the eye consciousness has not got that capability. The eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color. So what happens? So it's very obvious. The question is, well, which part of my mind is cognizing? It's a pretty cup. Which part of my mind is cognizing there is red and that's a pretty petal and there's a flower and there's a yellow? What part of my mind is doing that if it's not the eye consciousness, you know? Well, that's your mental consciousness. And as Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. So I say this, and it's really true. Quicker than Google, what happens is my eye consciousness goes there. And because my mind works quickly and I'm very opinionated, I won't say, oh, maybe that's a pretty cup. No, I'll say it is a pretty cup. What happens is my mental consciousness is accessed, and up will come an opinion, a thought. So now we get to the mental consciousness, and that's where the workshop is. That's where the millions of thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious, but it's at the level we function at, because mental consciousness has 2 ways of functioning. The grosser level, which is only the level we function at, which is conceptuality, including all our emotions. They're all rooted, and this is a vital thing to understand, they're rooted in being conceptual stories. But then we have a subtler level of mental consciousness that we do not even posit as existing in neuroscience because the brain is not involved, and we do not posit in modern psychology. And that they refer to that really as non-conceptual, but specifically direct perception, they say. So that we don't even, the best we can do is hear about that. We don't posit such a level. And these genius Indians more than 3,000 years ago, with their development of the technique called achieving samadhi, they accessed that subtler level. They basically discovered that there is a subtler level of mind that is not functioning in the brain, through the brain, can't be seen with the eyes because it's not physical, but they discovered it, they accessed it. And that's the key thing that Buddha's talking about. And in order to do the job of being a Buddha, to remove from the mind all the misconceptions, we need to get that samadhi and access this like the microscope of our mind, which is super powerful, super subtle, super amazing, super capable, in order to do the final job of unpacking and unraveling and removing all the misconceptions. So the key thing is we live at the level of conceptuality. Now, that's a big surprise to us, because in our world, when we go concepts, we point here. We think of mathematical concepts and complicated theories and philosophical views and views about there being a creator and views about karma. They're all conceptual thoughts. But then we think here, from down here, is emotion and feeling, and that's completely different as far as we're concerned. Well, it is different insofar as there's this enormous emotional component. It's true. And why is because they're habitual. That's all, because we've practiced them for so long. So in the middle scope, the main emphasis here isn't on all the misconceptions about reality, the philosophies and things. It's basically focusing on the mental afflictions, the mental illnesses, the disturbing emotions. And the Buddha lists these, but the 3 main ones, as we hear all the time: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. All the others are rooted in these, come down to these, So in the main emphasis here then is to identify these states of mind and to see the pain they cause us, you know. But when we understand it in a deeper way, we're going to see the other characteristic of these emotional afflictions, and that's the one that's indicated by this word delusion. That these mental afflictions have a characteristic of causing us to be delusional. Now, if you know yourself, if someone accuses you of being delusional, it's a very good word in English. They're telling you that you're not in touch with reality. You think you're Mozart, you think your husband's cheating on you. All these conspiracy theories the world loves to live in, they're all literally made up nonsense. So Buddha says attachment is a made up nonsense. It believes in a delicious divine cake on that plate that's the main cause of your happiness. It believes in that divine handsome man is totally perfect, and when you get him in your life, you'll be happy. It believes that the ugly ex-boyfriend who cheated on you is the cause of all your suffering. So these are not valid cognitions. They are not what are existing. There maybe there's some truth in there, but that is not what that phenomenon is. They are invalid cognitions. They are concepts, they are thoughts, but because we've practiced them for countless lives, they're tremendously emotional, and our body is involved as well. We are shaking with anger. We're shaking with bliss. Even the virtues are the same, but they're valid, but they're also physical. I mean, they're combined with the body when we experience them through the body, but they are not a function of the body. The body and the mind are intimately connected. And if you've got this Vajrayana model of the mind, which we discuss sometimes, we've got gross consciousness and gross body. Easy enough. Then we have subtle consciousness and subtle mind, subtle body, and that's the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions. That's subtle. We know we have them when we go to sleep. They're dreams. There's mental consciousness. Okay, we experience them in daily life, but they are more subtle in their capacity for cognition, all the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings. And they are inextricably linked with a subtle level of physicality. There's a subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels coursing through our entire body, and going through all those channels are this subtle wind energy, because the matter of the universe is made of the 4 elements. This is still the model they use, So all the wind energies, the different winds, are connected to our states of mind. So because anger is a very strong habit, let's say, that's why that you see the person shouting and yelling. But anger is not a function of the body. It's not a function of the speech. It's a function of the mind. But because it's strong habit, like when I was a little girl, my mother didn't have to teach me to be angry. I knew how. I came fully programmed with the habit, with the misconception, with the mental affliction, with the delusion called anger. A conceptual state of mind that exaggerates the ugliness of something. And it's the response to when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And attachment, effectively the main cause of all our suffering in day-to-day life, Lord Buddha says in his Four Noble Truths, that's a misconception. That's a conceptual thought that exaggerates the deliciousness of things. So these two run the universe, basically run our daily lives, and all the others are branched off those, You can argue that way, very simple. So attachment and aversion and jealousy and all those other afflictions, they're deeply ingrained habits. Animals have them. The model of the mind in Buddhism also refers to the monkeys and the dogs, And due to past habit, you get born in a particular life. That's the result of that. And you have a particular set of tendencies. So, that little monkey, some type of ape or monkey or chimpanzee, I forget, that's got a particular attachment to sex. As soon as it's born, the little boy monkey pops out of his mummy's womb, and he turns around and he has sex with his mummy. And then he has sex with his brother and his sister and his auntie and his uncle. They're very attached to sex, okay? And mummy didn't have to teach him. The habit was there. It was programmed. We call these things instinct. It's a great word. All it means is you've done those things that often in countless lives that it's second nature. That explains why it comes automatically, whether it's love or kindness or tennis or jumping on little boys, right? It's habits. And they've got this, and they're habitual, therefore they're very strongly imprinted in our mind. And because they're so strong, and because we have a body, then the body, we feel it at the level of our body. So we're shaking and shouting and moving. We say we feel things in our body because the mind and the body are inextricably linked. But they're mental. They are mental. They are mental. And at a grosser level, they're conceptuality. So we live at the level of conceptuality, including all the emotional components, all the emotional afflictions. They're all rooted in being conceptual stories. So it's hard to see that when we're involved in our body. That's why we have to have concentration. That's why we have to have the model of the mind very clear and study it properly, learn the definitions, learn the theories. And then with those theories, you then identify those in your mind. And then in your meditation, as you get better and better and better at concentration, you can hear these stories ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. And because you're so capable now, you can argue with them and deconstruct them and stop and literally change them. This is the job of being a Buddhist, okay? And the reason you want to change them and then eventually get rid of them is because, well, because they're the source of your pain. But the radical point is Buddha has found that you can change them and you can rid your mind of them. This is not how we think in our culture. I hear so often when people have PTSD and all the traumas, you can never change, they say, because we really believe it's our brain. You can't change it. And we know we can a little bit, but not that. We don't have much confidence. We can change things. So we stay stuck in stone, which is so tragic. So the Buddha says, so what's the logic? Okay, what is the logic? There is logic. It's clear logic. What is the logic in the statement of the Buddha that we can rid the mind of these neuroses? This is where we have to understand how they're conceptual stories, We have to understand this. So what's a concept? So, okay, back to me looking at the pretty cup. My eye consciousness sees bare bones, shape and color. And because everything you do in your mind, you memorize things, everything we've ever seen or touched or heard or tasted or smelt since beginningless time is stored in our mind. That's pretty incredible. It's like how we can be clairvoyant, So I've stored in my mind this life, whatever, what I think is nice. I've made up my viewpoints, because concepts are opinions, are viewpoints. Now, Buddha says in this model of the mind, remember, you've got neurotic, delusional, distressing, disturbing viewpoints, attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, that have no basis in reality. And then you have the virtuous states of mind, love and compassion, kindness, also intelligence, So, okay, so that is a pretty cup. That's a concept. It's not a function of eye consciousness. It's a memory in my mind. I know what I've liked. I've built up my habits and my eyes go there. My mental consciousness is accessed quicker than Google, and out of my mouth comes what a pretty cup. So it's an opinion, basically. And this is the biggest tragedy of our lives. From the second we wake up in the morning, our senses experience things. It's our doorway to the world, to the senses, isn't it? So then you stub your toe. It's a sensory experience, fact. And then you can have angry. That's an opinion. How dare that happen to me? And you curse. Or, your husband smiles at you, and so you get a happy feeling. Oh, isn't he lovely, we'll say. They're opinions, they're viewpoints, they're opinions, all based on what you experience through your senses. So we live our lives having sensory experiences and then giving opinions about them. And of course, the tragedy is we think every thought we have is a fact. Every thought we have is a fact. So when I say that's a pretty cup, I don't think for 1 second that that's an opinion of the cup. I think it's a fact. But if let's say you look at it and you've got different taste, you will say, no, that's an ugly cup, and then we'll have a war, because you believe your opinion is not an opinion, it's a fact as well. That's how come we have problems, because I'm attached to my view. I believe it's right. And not only do I think it's right, I think it's right, but I don't even think it's an opinion. This is the biggest tragedy. I don't even think it's an opinion. Incredible, Now, there can be valid opinions. 1 + 1 is an opinion, is a viewpoint, is a concept. But we can prove, taking the view of what's called the body of knowledge called math, we can prove, and that's why truth is conventional. That's why truth is conventional. You can prove 1 + 1 is 2. That's easy. That's a valid concept, because it is in sync with the object. So we could even say that is a pretty cup if we have rules about determining what a pretty cup is. If you go to the special show about pretty cups and it can win the pretty cup contest. We can argue there are rules. It's a bit more vague. 1 + 1 is very precise. So we can say there are concepts in the mind that are valid. And a valid concept is one that is in sync with the object, with the way the object exists, validity, the reality. So 1 + 1 is easy. Now, Buddha is saying there is objective truth, there is conventional truth, and there is ultimate truth. And the ultimate reality, the final reality that determines everything that does exist is that it doesn't have an intrinsic nature, which sounds very backward and sort of negative. What do you mean it doesn't have? You know? And why he's telling us that is the final truth. And this is not religious truth. He didn't make it up, he's observed it. The final truth that determines everything that does exist, if something exists by definition, it has a conventional characteristic, a conventional truth that can be proved, and it has finally, it is not exist. That, okay, a cup, the flat-bottomed metal container, first part of the definition, second part keeps my tea warm. That is a conventional fact. And you prove it. You put the tea in, put the lid on, an hour back, come later, and it's still hot. So we proved it's true. That's a valid cognition. You have to prove it. Now, the trouble is this is now getting to emptiness. I'm jumping up a bit up the path here. All this stuff leads to it. Naturally, what happens is you've proved it does exist validly, conventionally, and then what we don't realize is this ignorance in the mind immediately paints upon it that holder of tea, that keeper of tea as warm. The keeper of tea as warm is intrinsic, is in the cup itself. It is existing in the cup itself. It is existing intrinsically in the cup. And Buddha says, no, it doesn't. Ultimately, it lacks that. It lacks that. That's a misconception. It conventionally does hold my tea, but ultimately it is absent. The holder of the keeper of warm tea, whatever you understand, does not exist from its own side. It's merely labeled. This is the two truths together. So one does not contradict the other, they prove each other. This is the final place where we go with all these concepts, So we can say things do exist validly, and you define it, and then you prove it. Not ultimate. There's no 1 + 1 is 2 ultimately. It's a truth within the body of knowledge of math. Everything exists within a conventional body of knowledge. It's not an ultimate. It can't be. It can't be. But we think it is. We think it's absolutely true. And it's our opinion. And then we set it in stone. And that's the cause of all suffering in the universe, So we live at the level of conceptuality, is what I'm saying, including emotions. And they're conceptual, but their body's involved as well because they're so intensely that we've practiced them for so long. And our tragedy in the West is we only notice them when the body feels them. That's the trouble. And it's too late. That's the wheels falling off, it's a bit too late. That's why learning to get a practice and to get some focus, we start to hear the thoughts, the conceptual stories, the script in our head before it becomes emotional. That's the greatest skill we can learn, how to live our lives, Any questions? I did more than middle scope there, but never mind. Any questions so far? Just a little bit middle scope, that was about the mind. I have to blow my nose, excuse me. I'm in Santa Fe and it always get dry here. Are there any questions about, well, keep it simple. There's any questions about, I haven't gone into the details much even. Well, there's more to say about the mind. Let's say a bit more, okay? So in the model of the mind, you've got the negative states of mind, the neurotic delusional misconceptions that are cognitions that don't have a valid basis. That's the point to get. When we do this, we're home, We understand how the mind works. We understand why we suffer. Then you have the states of mind that are valid conventionally. They're valid. Because they are in sync with reality. So how are they in sync? How is love and compassion? Okay, how are love and compassion in sync with reality? It's an interesting point, isn't it? Well, and how is attachment and anger not in sync? Well, this is the reality we're talking about here. Is yes, on a conventional level, they function according to the definition. But finally, they're not in touch with dependent arising, which is the ultimate, which is the final conventional reality. They're not in touch with dependent arising. When you've got attachment and aversion, they're rooted in the view of a separate me and separate you and separate this and separate that. So they're all bullshit, you know. But the virtues are in sync with dependent arising to some degree. When you have love and compassion for somebody, you're connected to the person. There's a feeling of connectedness, you're feeling of closeness. You feel what they're thinking, and you're close to each other. You're harmonious. When things are all in sync with dependent arising, things work. Things are harmonious, you know. When the delusions are rampant, everything's jagged and broken and wrong and confusing. So, okay, back to my point before, and I got carried away, but let me go back to the point I want to show, the logic. What's the logic to prove that you can rid the mind of the misconceptions? Well, if we're talking about valid cognitions, conventional truths, they're conventional independence upon a body of knowledge, right? They're not absolute convention, not absolute truth. So, you know, if I say to you, 1 plus 1, I'm learning math, and I say 1 plus 1 is 3. And you say, don't be silly, Robina, you got it wrong. 1 plus 1 is 2. And I'll go, oh, you're right. I'm sorry, you're right. So then, okay, let's look at that. So we all agree within math, 1 plus 1 is 3. 1 plus 1 is not 3. So that was a misconception. There's no object, there's no valid basis for that. So then I had that thought. So okay, that's a thought in my mind. Well, that was a thought, right? I had the thought, 1 plus 1 is 3. I had the thought. And you pointed out it was wrong. And because I'm trying to learn, I'm not trying to hold on to it, I recognize you're right. And I said, oh, you're right. It's 1 plus 1 is 2. So that's another thought. So 1 minute there's a thought that says 1 plus 1 is 3. Then I have another thought that says 1 plus 1 is 2. So we all agree. I've agreed with you. I agree. I buy into the truth that 1 plus 1 is 2 is correct. So the simple question is, what happened to the previous thought? 1 plus 1 is 3. What happened to it? Well, we know perfectly well what happened to it. It disappeared. Where? Into a puff of smoke. And this is the point now. This is the crucial point. What made it go is the valid cognition 1 plus 1 is 3 in my mind. My conviction, my recognition of the truth that 1 plus 1 is 2. My recognition of the truth, not as believing in it, not as crossing my fingers, but valid cognition. I know it's true. 1 plus 1 is 2. So that valid concept in my mind, that's in my mind, that's what caused the misconception to disappear into a puff of smoke. That's how you get enlightened. So that's finally when you're in samadhi, and you've done all your analysis of dependent arising, and you controlled your body, you controlled your speech, you controlled your mind, you got bodhicitta, you're an Arya bodhisattva, you're in your subtle meditation, you got samadhi, and you're doing all your analysis of dependent arising, and one day, finally, one day, the penny will drop, and you will see nakedly, for the first time, experientially, non-conceptually, directly, at the subtlest level of your mind, you will see nakedly and directly the truth that there never has been, isn't, and never could be such a thing as an independent I, an intrinsic I, an inherent I. In other words, 1 plus 1 is 3. You know it can't be right. It's not right. And what made it go is the recognition of the fact, of dependent arising. That's your first moment of a non-conceptual, direct insight into emptiness. And from that second, you are climbing out of samsara, moving towards nirvana, and you can't fall back because you've just cut the root of all suffering. There's more work to do, but you can't go further. You can't go back after that. So that's the logic. Misconceptions, because they don't have a valid basis, because they're not conventionally true, you can remove them from the mind. And what removes them is the recognition of what is true. This is not truth coming from God. No, it's not made up by somebody and then imposed on things. Emptiness is a characteristic. Emptiness of intrinsic existence is a characteristic of everything that exists conventionally. It's what defines it as a phenomenon. Buddha says that's truth, that's reality. It's not his truth. He's not his truth. He didn't make it up. That's ridiculous. It's like natural law. This is natural law. This is natural truth. This is natural truth. This is how things exist, he says. This is how things exist. It's staring at us right now. The emptiness of intrinsic cup and of intrinsic me, intrinsic phone, intrinsic everything in front of me, intrinsic computer, intrinsic you, that's there staring at us. But we're as blind as bats. We can't see it. Sometimes if emptiness is hidden. It's not, it's naked. But we can't see it because of our misconceptions. If I'm totally convinced that cake is the cause of my happiness, which attachment tells me, then it's a lie. It's a plain lie. And I can even prove it from my experience, but I'm so addicted. I can't see the truth. I can't see the real cake at all. Blind as a bat. That's how we suffer. So ask me some questions now. That's more than the middle scope. I'm sorry.
Yes, Maria.
Maria, talk to me, sweetheart.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening. Just a question. There is this cup. This is truth. We use it as, so it is a keeper of hot tea is not necessarily conventionally true. But what about we use it as a keeper of, or typically use it as a keeper of hot tea?
Yeah, then simply for that moment, so we can decide it's a cup because we know so we call it a cup because we get used to the view of it's a cup. They make it as a cup. It's called a cup. It's in the cup section. It's in the cup section of the shop. It's not in the toilet section. You don't go there and buy, but we know we could use it as a toilet. We know that. Then for that moment, it fits the definition of a toilet. No problem. No problem. Then tomorrow use it as a cup again. No problem. No problem. Do you understand?
So is it then truth or is it a thought? We
Right.
use it.
No, do what you like. If you can use a knife to use it as you can use a knife as a spoon. It won't be so effective. You can use anything as anything. So for that moment, it fits the definition of being that. Of course it does. I mean, just because it was made as a cup, that's proving the point. It's not cup in its bones. That's what proves it.
Thank you.
Do you understand? But it doesn't deny the conventional nature of it being a cup. It's comfortable. It's a comfortable definition, you know. In other words, if I say, tell me where the toilet is, and you pass me a cup, we'll be confused. But we know it can be used as a toilet if we're clever. But sometimes you just can't. You can't use a knife to. Anyway, never mind. But that really is proving it doesn't have an intrinsic nature, which doesn't mean it still doesn't mean it's not a cup conventionally. But for that moment, it's a toilet, or that moment, it's a vase that holds the flowers. You understand? Do you understand? Yeah, perfectly fine. Yes. Anybody else? Any questions? Any points? Yes. Hello there. Who's got a hand? Are you Mr. Scheiden, or is that your first name?
It's hello, thank you very much. No, Andreas is my name. It's a mistake.
Andreas. Okay, good, Andreas. Talk to me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question, maybe it's a bit off topic. You said
Doesn't
the
matter.
mind is awareness, consciousness, or use different terms. And I was wondering, when I sleep and I have no awareness, where's my mind going or what's
Yeah.
happening then?
Okay, so this is where we have to, if we understand the Vajrayana, the Tantrayana model of the mind and the body, Andreas, we've got gross consciousness, which is the sensory consciousness, inextricably linked to the stages of death, actually, how they describe it. So when we go to sleep, we know very well that temporarily the sensory consciousnesses have ceased. So we know that. And that means that, your body, the sensory are not functioning, but your mental consciousness is there, and that's when you dream. So sometimes you're not aware of your dreams, but your mental consciousness is there all the time. But they talk about the wind energies in the body. Don't worry, when they go all in, then they talk in the subtle level of the body. We've got this subtle nervous system, and all the wind energies. This is the same. This is the wind energies coursing through all those channels, and all those different wind energies are connected to our different states of mind. So when you have your dreams, that's your mental consciousness, and they're chatting away, and it's kind of weird. But if you're really deeply asleep, then your mind has temporarily stopped functioning. But it's there at a very subtle level, but it's not evident to us. There's gross consciousness, subtle consciousness and then very subtle consciousness. And that's the subtlest level of your mind. And that finally is what there is just the moment before you die. And then that's what leaves the body. You go to another life. So if your grosser consciousness has subtle level, or your dream mind, your concepts, they have ceased as well. But your consciousness is still there, which is why you're still breathing.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Does that make
think
sense?
gives
Okay.
food for thought. Thank you.
Okay. Huh? Yeah, food. It's a different model. It's a completely different way of seeing. It's coming from the Vajrayana, and it's a very different way of explaining it. It's very fascinating, actually. There's some, yeah. Do you understand?
Not yet, but I will think about it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good enough for now, Andreas? Well, okay, good. All right, good. Okay, good. Okay, yes, Alona.
Hi, Venerable.
Alona,
Thank you.
yes, talk to me.
Thank you for your teachings.
Good.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Darling. Yes, I can. I
Um,
can, darling, yes.
I
Hear
think,
me.
sorry,
Can you
I
hear me?
think
Okay.
I
yeah,
don't
I
see you.
think
Good.
Your picture is not here,
your
Venerable.
picture's frozen. We can hear you well,
Down
Venerable.
there.
Yeah,
My picture,
your picture's
well,
frozen.
my
We
picture's
can-
moving. I can see myself talking. I can see myself talking. My mouth is moving. My hand is waving.
Okay,
You
we
can't see
do
me
hear
yet.
you
We don't-
well, but on our end, you're
But you can't
frozen.
see
It's
me.
interesting. There you are.
Okay. Okay, I'm there now. Okay, so good. What's your question? I don't know.
I was, you were talking about compassion, which is so I understand, is a virtuous state of mind. And this
It's
is
a conceptual
in
thought
sync,
and it's a virtue. Conceptual thought and it's a virtue. Yeah.
yeah, and this is in sync with dependent arising.
Well, relatively conventionally, it is some degree of valid cognition because it's linked to others. There's a sense of interdependence, isn't there? Do you understand my feeling? When attachment or anger in the mind, you're very isolated. There's no feeling of connection with others. It's a very colloquial way that I'm talking. You're very rigid. You're very miserable. You're not seeing clearly. You see the person through the lenses of your own needs. You have this fantasy view. But when you have empathy and compassion, you're more connected to the other person. You're feeling their presence. You're feeling their feelings. And that's more, in a sense, where things are interdependently working nicely. It's just a way of talking.
Okay, and yes, I understand. That was I was thinking about that, like the difference. And then about the reality, so in sync with reality, so that realities means that made of love and compassion. If we can make that small conclusion.
Sorry, start again. I don't understand the point. Say those again, those words.
The virtues, the positive, then
They're
state of
virtuous
mind.
conceptual thoughts. They're valid. They're virtuous and they're valid because there's some basis of reality there. You're seeing the person, relatively speaking, reasonably. You're hearing what they're saying. You understand what they're saying. You're not arguing. You're not seeing a different picture. When you've got attachment or anger, the person you see is a fantasy, it's just a view of your own rubbish. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand. And then the part in it, the reality means that made of love and compassion.
No,
But
no. What do you mean made of love and compassion? What does that mean? What do you mean by made of?
because if compassion is rooted in reality, if
Well,
love
it's just the way I'm saying it very loosely. A valid cognition, in general, what makes a thought a valid thought is if it's in sync with the object it's cognizing. So when there's attachment there, it's a fantasy that your mind is making up. It's literally a fantasy, and there's no relationship between the fantasy and the cake on the plate. And then if you have love for somebody, your mind is more calm, it's more spacious, and you are feeling the reality of that person. You're delighted if they're happy, you're sad if they're suffering. So literally your mind is more reasonable. Love and compassion are more reasonable, which means they're more valid because there's a reality there. That person, you're seeing more the person as they are. They're not totally valid yet until you realize emptiness.
okay.
They're closer to validity than the delusions, which are fantasies. Do you understand me?
Yes, I understood. Yes, thank you.
Yes, Beth, what's your question, my dear?
Hello, Venerable. Thank you for your teachings.
Good, darling.
Please, can you explain what is a conventional and ultimate reality, and how do they differ?
The conventional reality of the cup is, you call it a cup. What is a cup? You give the definition. You say it's the flat bottom clay container. You then tell what it does. It holds my tea. You then prove it by pouring the tea into it. And so you tick the box and you say that is a conventional truth. Another example is you say 1 + 1 is 2. That's a conventional truth. Because it fits with what is existing. You've proved that the cup holds the tea. The definition tells you that it is the holder of your tea. You pour the tea in it, you prove that it holds the tea. So you tick the box and say that's a valid cognition. So now the ultimate reality of that cup is that you won't find any intrinsic, independent, inherent holder of tea, that is completely empty, that doesn't exist on the cup. That's the ultimate reality of the cup.
Okay.
So emptiness is the term for ultimate reality, emptiness of independent cup, and dependent arising is the term for conventional reality, that everything exists in dependence upon causes, independence upon their parts, and finally, independence upon the mind calling it cup. That's how things exist conventionally. And that's your first step, to establish what exists conventionally. And then we have to try and find the intrinsic holder of tea, which ignorance causes us to believe exists there. And we will eventually discover that there is no intrinsic, independent, inherent holder of tea. That doesn't exist there. That is empty of existing there. And that's the two truths. But that doesn't deny there is a conventional cup. And saying there's a conventional cup doesn't deny that there's no cup from its own side. This is the two truths together.
Okay, but what if you saw the cup as like a weapon, like you can use it
That's another, as I said before, that's another discussion. If you use it as a weapon, then indeed it becomes a weapon, doesn't it? No problem. That proves there's no intrinsic cup there. That just proves it exactly.
So is that like still conventional? Is that like a conventional view then?
That's another. So then at that moment in time, if you throw the cup at your boyfriend, in your mind, it's not a cup. In your mind, it's a weapon, and you use it as a weapon, and it functions as a weapon. So conventionally, it validly is a weapon. Conventionally, reality, it is a weapon, yeah. For that moment, yeah, you could argue that.
Okay, thank you, Venerable.
All right, darling. Anybody else?
I didn't understand.
Who is I speaking here?
Me.
Okay, what piece don't you understand, darling?
If a cup is a cup and we call it a cup so we can communicate better.
That's
So
right,
when
exactly. Let's help
So I have the cup and cup.
That's right.
And it's
exactly.
not only for my cup of tea, it can be for water, it can be as a toilet in
Well,
radical situations that you
What's the
said.
point? So which is the piece you don't understand? Which is, you said I don't
The
understand.
unconventional truth, the dependent arising, I mean, if the cup is there and it's here to not to serve me, for me to use. So
What's the question then? What's the
what's
problem?
the unconventional truth? What it's not there, it is there.
You're asking, what does emptiness mean? Is that your question?
I guess so.
Okay. Well, I mean, with a few words I've said, and this is the most difficult point. That's why it's not really part of this middle scope, but I sort of went into it. That's the part that's hard to hear, Ariel. We have to learn it and study it and think about it. So what the Buddha's saying is, we can say that's a conventionally existent cup, and you can be right. But what he's saying is, we don't realize it, but this ignorance in our mind, this very deep delusion, makes the cup appear to us as if cupness is there in the cup. We think it's a cup from its own side. We think it's a cup that's set in stone as a cup. We think it's an inherent cup, an intrinsic cup. And finally, we think it's a cup that's got nothing to do with my mind. That's how Buddha talks. And that's what we have to learn to try and understand. It's quite subtle. All right, sweetheart. That'll do for the moment. Any other questions, people? So I think we should go back to the proper middle scope, and which is really focusing on attachment and anger and the delusion. Let's do that, okay? So that's the real point here. And I didn't go, I went across, I went over. So in the middle part, we have to really become familiar with attachment. And I would say even the most basic attachment and aversion. Attachment and aversion. They sound so simple, you know, but attachment's the default one, is the one that's there at it's the core of our being, so deep, so habitual, so ancient, and it's multifaceted. There's attachment. The most basic level of attachment is this painful feeling of dissatisfaction, never having enough. Some people have it way worse than others. We can see that, but always dissatisfied. No matter what we get, it's not enough. No matter what we see, it's not enough. No matter what we achieve, it's not enough. No matter what we do, it's not enough. No matter how much you tell me you love me, it's not enough. And that can be very, very, all of us, it's painful. But sometimes it can be terribly painful pain for many people, such suffering, intense suffering, dissatisfaction. So it's a bottomless pit, you know. The other aspect of attachment is it therefore gives rise to this emotional hunger. It causes us to feel like this empty feeling. So we're emotionally hungry for something. So then we're convinced that when I get this and when I get that and when I get the boyfriend, when I get the cake, when he says this, when he does that, when I get that job, whatever it might be, we're convinced that then I will be satisfied. Then that will fill up the gaping hole. So this is the proactive level of attachment, this emotional hunger that goes out there anticipating, no, looking for, searching for things and people and events that such that when I get them, they will make me feel fulfilled. This is what drives all sentient beings. Now, alongside those delusions, we have this other category of states of mind called the virtuous ones, the love and the kindness and patience and intelligence, and they are our saving grace, you know. They mitigate the neuroses. They calm the neuroses. Therefore, the more virtues we have, the less we suffer. The more delusions we have and the less virtue, the more we're happy, I'm sorry. The virtues make us more calm and reasonable. But the delusions, if they're really running rampant, this is why we suffer so terribly, you know. So we have to identify, we have to distinguish between and identify the neurotic deluded ones and the valid virtuous ones. And we just see them as a big soup in our head right now. We don't even make this distinction, you know. So attachment is dissatisfaction, it's emotional hunger, it then manipulates to get, and then its crucial job, its heart job, its main job, it exaggerates. The more the emotional hunger, the more the dissatisfaction, the more the emotional hunger, the more the object will look totally divine. The cake will look the most divine thing you've ever seen. The boyfriend will look the most best person on the planet. You just can't believe how divine this person is. You've found this special treasure that will appear heavenly. That's attachment exaggerating the deliciousness, which makes you as blind as a bat. You see the cake like that, and all you want to get it is in your mouth, and you're convinced that satisfaction will come. So you have your first piece full of cake, and this is the tragedy about attachment. You've been anticipating the cake, building up all the idea of it, waiting for the cake to come, attachment's right there, you get the cake, you put it in the mouth, and this is the point. It does trigger some pleasant feelings, definitely, but attachment is still not satisfied. Attachment says, sorry, Robina, that mouthful's not enough, you've got to have a second mouthful. So you're not satisfied again. So you have another mouthful, and you have another mouthful, and before you know it, you've eaten 4 pieces of cake, and now you want to vomit. Where does the happiness go? Down the toilet, because you're dissatisfied. This is the tragedy of attachment and believing, especially the sensory, believing that getting sensory objects, it's our main way of getting happiness. We mightn't be junkies, we mightn't be rapists, but you know, we know the senses, we are all the time trying to satisfy them, all the time trying to get the nice weather, the nice feelings, you know, no pain, nice food, nice sounds, nice smells, nice tastes, Well, that's what we're focusing on all the time, attachment to the objects of the senses. Convinced that getting them will bring satisfaction, will bring happiness. But the fact of the matter is, this is a scientific truth, not religious. Satisfaction can't come through the sensory consciousness. We can prove it. If satisfaction, genuine fulfillment, satisfaction comes from having cakes, then the more you eat, the more happy you'll get. And we know it's the opposite. So this is the tragedy of the suffering of attachment to objects of the senses, you know. So that we have to see that, recognize that drives all of us. So this is why we're always dissatisfied, and especially about ourselves. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's satisfied with their body. All we do is see ugly, see the wrong shape, the wrong nose, the wrong ear, the wrong eye, the wrong, you know, the left-hand corner of the third joint down your hand is the wrong shape. We are obsessed with our bodies. And I don't think I've met anybody on the planet who's really content with their body, always finding fault. That's dissatisfaction, you know. It's just totally tragic. Totally tragic. You can see it when you have extreme examples like Michael Jackson, you know. But everybody could see he was like a parody, he looked like a parody of a human being, but he couldn't see it. He couldn't see it. It's dissatisfaction. The same when we're anorexic. And I mean, they talk about that, what's that term they use? Body what's that word? Dysmorphia. We've all got it. We're not as extreme, that's all. We're all the same as Michael Jackson, just not as extreme. We all don't, what we see in the mirror is awful. This is the function of dissatisfaction, the function of attachment that wants it to be better. It's very fascinating. We all have it. And it's such pain. And that's the grossest level. And then what aversion is the bare bones state of mind that is the response when attachment is thwarted. And attachment is thwarted 1,000 times a day. You stub your toe. The hubby slurps his coffee. The light is red instead of green. You get an unhappy feeling. The taste of the food is not right. Tiny baby things. And by the end of the day, no wonder you're exhausted, you know. So aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And then strong aversion is anger. Mild aversion is irritation, upset, annoyed, frustrated. But we don't pay attention to those. We just think that's normal. But they're mild anger, dissatisfied, angry. Shouldn't be this way. How dare it be this way? Don't do this to me. Annoyed, frustrated, upset. We live like this. And anxiety is the interplay between those two. Worrying about all the things that you want to happen that they won't happen, worrying about all the things that will happen that you don't want to happen, worrying, never stopping. And because attachment has the function of controlling, grasping at things to be the way we want. So the most bare bones way of talking about attachment, and this sounds very cruel, is this junkie in us, this fragile child that can only cope with everything being lovely. And of course, what lovely? My lovely. And as soon as we don't get lovely, that's the arising of aversion, you know. So it's totally self-centered. By definition, it's self-centered. It's the main voice of ego. So, of course, if you've got love and patience and kindness, that mitigates the attachment. But if you've got mainly attachment, you'd be what people call a narcissist. You'd be what's called a psychopath if it's really strong, attachment and aversion, you know. So, but I think in our psychology in the West, we don't factor in ethics and goodness, you know. ADHD, that's attachment. Another whole level of functioning of attachment is a busy, busy, busy mind, unable to focus. Buddha's been telling us this for 3,000 bloody years, you know. That's why he's got concentration and meditation. We think we've discovered it recently, like we're such clever people. Ridiculous. OCD, obsessive compulsive, that's attachment. Bipolar, that's attachment gone berserk. Up and down like a yo-yo, you know. 1 minute excited, 1 minute depressed. All this is a function of attachment and aversion. It sounds so simple. It sounds almost too simple. We make it so complicated in the West, you know. Are we communicating, people? So join the universe. It's okay. Nothing wrong with you. You're just normal. But you can get rid of them. You become less attached, less angry, more stable, more happy, more fulfilled, more content. That's the point. That's all Buddha's telling us. Forget nirvana, forget Buddhahood, just even day to day. You become more fulfilled, more content. Yes, Wolfgang, ask your question.
Robina, what is please the root cause for this emotional hunger?
The root cause is ego grasping, the one that asserts the existence of an intrinsic, real, separate, inherent Wolfgang. That's the root. Ego grasping is known colloquially that the very belief in an intrinsic Wolfgang, and that's the deepest one in our bones, and its nature is total fear and panic. And so then attachment, this emotional hunger, because we're asserting a separate, concrete, limited I, then there's this emotional hunger to make the I whole, which is attachment. But it's a fantasy. It's a complete nonsense. So realizing emptiness cuts the root of the main one. So but the first level is you have to calm the attachment down, calm the aversion down, become more fulfilled, become more whole, become more connected to others. All that is moving us towards realizing there's no intrinsic I there, which is what the source of the pain is.
Is it helpful, instead of seeing object as fixed, to see them as processes of changing
Yes, of
processes?
course. That's understanding impermanence, and that comes before emptiness, and it's a very powerful practice. Absolutely, that really leads us to realize that they're not set in stone. Impermanence is very powerful. Process, yes, absolutely, Wolfgang.
I will try this. Thank you very much.
Okay, darling. Okay, what else, people? You see, all these are philosophical positions. You can study impermanence in depth, you can study karma in depth, study the mind, but they're all, the more you study each one, the more they lead to the others, because they're all part of the coherent picture. And it's very encouraging to see that, you know. And the one about impermanence is the first teaching that Buddha gave, really, that things change. Then there's a subtle level of impermanence that is the very coming into existence of something is also proves the very going out of existence, and you can't have one without the other. And this is really almost like, it's almost like emptiness, almost like you can't find it. And this is why that Wolfgang's question is a good one, you know, seeing it as process, not set in stone, drama, grasping, holding, real, solid. You go mad, you know, but seeing it as process, let it go, move forward, moving. This can lead us. That's called impermanence. And that can lead you to the more subtle one of realizing there's no intrinsic I there. Very beneficial. Yes, Maria.
Thank you. I very often separate between the body, which I call the house.
So start again, darling. Start again, Maria. I missed you.
No, it's okay. Thank you. So very often I see the body, which is kind of the holder of the sensors, as the house, as the house, as Buddha says, you know, where that is building with bricks and stones and so on. So something only happens in this life. While the spirit, the purpose comes, it's the home of our, and that can be in the house, but it can be also in different places, in different hours. It has its own. So the spirit, it's by its own a different entity, a different. It's home. It's home for me, for other. So
what do you call the second one? You call it spirit. Buddhism would call it your consciousness or your mind.
yes.
He doesn't use the word spirit. So yes, absolutely, Maria. We have physical and we have mental. In fact, the Buddhist view of the universe is that there's only two things existing: minds, trillions upon trillions of mental consciousnesses that go back and back and back like rivers of mental moments, and then billions and billions of minds, and then there's matter, and matter is made of the four elements. That's still the model they use, and all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. So we've got the gross body and the gross consciousness, which is the senses. Then we have the subtle physical energy, the subtle nervous system. This is what the Tibetan medical system and the Ayurvedic system, the Chinese acupuncture system vaguely talk the same way. We have this subtle physical energy, a subtle nervous system, which is made of the channels and then all this wind energies, and they're all connected to our different states of mental consciousness. And then we have this very subtle level of mind. So yes, mind is the main thing. Mind is the main thing, consciousness, and that can be developed to perfection. Eventually, when you've achieved enlightenment, achieved Buddhahood, your consciousness is now completely in sync with reality. You have absolute wisdom. You have infinite compassion for every other being because you finally cut any distinction between me and other. You have infinite wisdom. Your mind pervades the universe, and you can manifest in billions of bodies to be of benefit to sentient beings. This is how they talk. So your consciousness, your mind is, of course, is the main thing. Of course it is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the question is, and the way I'm trying to see it is that by being virtuous, I make my consciousness happy.
Yes, that's the whole point. That's the essential point that Buddha makes. The deluded, unhappy, restricted, constricted, miserable, neurotic states of mind make us totally miserable, and virtues and love and compassion and kindness make us happy. Right now, not to mention the future, absolutely.
While all the delusions so on make our body happy. So
Precisely. They don't really make the body happy. Temporarily, getting the cake in the mouth can give you a brief moment of pleasure. And this doesn't mean you shouldn't have cake. You can learn to work with that, but it doesn't bring it can't be satisfied. You've got to stop at some point. Because you can't satisfy attachment through the senses. It's not possible, because the more you have contact with the object, the more you are miserable.
because it doesn't satisfy the spirit or the consciousness. That's how I
That's
make
exactly right. That's why happiness has to be cultivated in the mental consciousness. We've got to practice being happy. It won't just come naturally. We have to practice it with virtue, practice being content, thinking positive thoughts, thinking I'm doing good enough, thinking I'm okay. We have to practice thinking positive thoughts, practicing being satisfied, practice being content. It won't come in any other way. We can't just wait for it to come. And that's our big problem in our culture. We don't know how to do that. We do. We know that by helping others, it can bring it, but it almost seems accidental. But we have to practice it mentally. Do you understand?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for the answers and my, understand. Also, being
Yeah, no, it's perfect. You understand well. It's very good. Good, darling. What else there? Somebody else have some questions? Huh? So next week we talk about bodhicitta, and we talk about the 6 perfections, and we'll get to talk about emptiness as well, because that comes. But let me just explain a little bit here. We've got to remember, okay, the first state, the wisdom wing, which is the first and second scopes of the Lamrim, that's the teachings we share with the Hinayana path. That's the teachings we share with the teachings in Burma and Thailand. And if we complete that path, we would then get, we would control the body and speech, live in vows, purify the body and speech and mind. We'd then go to the second scope and get rid of attachment, get renunciation. But what we'd do, we would get samatha. Get shamatha, we'd use single point of concentration and get subtle focus, and then we would realize emptiness. So those 2 teachings, which are taught in the Lamrim at the end as the 5th and the 6th of the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva, are not in their character Mahayana teachings. They are in their character Hinayana teachings. Okay, there are Mahayana interpretations of emptiness, no question, but they are not in their nature Mahayana teachings. So then you have to ask the question, well, why in the Lamrim are they not taught at that level, but we wait till we get to the Bodhisattva path? Well, if you think about it, I don't know, I think it's probably true. The thing is, when we realize and Lama Yeshe talks about this in Mahamudra, when you've got single point of concentration, we can't even conceive of the bliss, the rapture, the ecstasy. Lama uses those words. We can't even imagine the levels of utter bliss that our mind would experience. So if you think about that, if you're on that path and you get your renunciation, you control your body and speech, you get your renunciation, you get concentration, and then then you get emptiness. Even if forget even emptiness yet. But if you get concentration, you'll be so blissed out. Who cares about sentient beings? I mean, who cares about sentient beings? Because in the first stages, there's no discussion about sentient beings. It's all about your own suffering, all about getting your own happiness. And that's fine. You need that. But if you then go get shamatha, and even just shamatha, you can go to complete bliss. And even if you do realize emptiness, you'll forget that's what the Hinayana path, you'll even then realize emptiness to get that. Your goal is to get the hell out of samsara and never come back again. So that's your main goal, life after life after life. So of course you're going to have compassion. If you realize emptiness, of course you're going to have compassion. Of course you'll have love and compassion. But when you die in that life, because your goal for countless lifetimes is to get nirvana, to achieve the cessation of suffering and not come back, your bliss overrides any compassion you had, and you'll zap into bliss. They actually say, in many of the teachings, they say you'll disappear completely. There's no such thing as your mind continuing. Your mind will disappear like a puff of smoke. So that's, so then that's the danger. If you get any kind of bliss, forget about sentient beings. So they leave those until the perfections. And then after you got renunciation, you're sick of your own suffering. And now you're moving towards others and you're realizing, my God, they're in the same boat. And now you go get love, compassion, and bodhicitta. And now there's no way you're going to forget sentient beings now. There's no way in the universe you'll forget sentient beings. You can have bliss, but it won't throw you. You won't lose your bodhicitta, So it's very practical. Do you understand, people? Makes sense. Hello, Monica. Talk to me.
Hello, Madam Robina. Thank you. It's
Good
so
morning.
good to see you again.
Good.
Live. Yes, it was a while. Yeah, I mean, this is a very good point, and I think that Tara understands this point because we talk a lot about it.
Who understands? Sorry, who understands?
Tara.
Oh, I see. Good. Okay, your friend Tara. Good. Okay, good. I'm happy. Then.
Yeah, no, yeah. My question is, now talking about emptiness and like first liberating ourselves, and then thinking about sentient beings, like how do we? I guess it's probably a simple answer, but it is still something that drags me. And it's how we keep ourselves like grounded in the face of for example, like very extreme highly sufferings of other people. You see what I'm saying? Like
it's completely easy to understand. It's completely easy, but we don't think about it. You'll hear it. This is why the compassion wing, as His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. And what is the wisdom you need? You need renunciation of suffering. So if you don't know that your attachment and your anger and your delusions and your negative actions cause you pain, and if you don't get to the point in the first and second scopes of being absolutely revolted by your suffering, that you don't have that, how on earth can you have the ability to bear the pain of others? Because you can't even, if once you've lessened attachment, it's okay. So that you've got to have the recognition of suffering in yourself, and you've got to be God wanting to completely go beyond it. So when you're like that means you've got less attachment, you have less anger, you have less fear. You haven't realized emptiness even, but you've got less delusions. Now, when you see others suffering, you won't suffer so much, because the causes of suffering are attachment and aversion. The causes of suffering are not compassion. When you have less attachment, then you will not suffer so much when you see suffering. The reason we suffer now when we see other people suffering is not because of compassion, Maria. It's because we have got attachment, which is a junkie that only wants to see everything as lovely. So as soon as you see other people suffering, you find it unbearable. Which part of you? Your bloody attachment and your aversion. That's why we suffer. So unless you've done the first and second scopes, you can't, your compassion is too limited. Are we communicating, Maria?
Yeah, it was me actually, Monica.
Monica, I meant Monica. But are we communicating? I shouted loud.
Yeah, yes.
The point, Monica.
Yeah, I do feel like my afflictions have lessened a lot.
I don't care about that. Shush. Monica, did you hear what I said?
Yes.
Tell me in your words what I said, Monica. This is such a powerful, I cannot tell you. Tell me what I said.
Yeah. Well, that we need to, even if we haven't like realized emptiness, we need to work on our mind to lessen our attachment, because the causes of suffering, even for us seeing suffering others, it's because of attachment, right?
You see, that's the point I'm saying. Do you see that?
Yes, I see it.
All in the world, we all think we suffer because of compassion. That's the commonest view in the West, and it's totally grotesquely wrong. Compassion is not possible to cause suffering. It's not possible to suffer because we have compassion. It's because we have attachment, and we don't even know that in the West. Attachment is a junkie, a self-centered junkie that only wants everything to be lovely. So there you are, you're looking at the world, you see the suffering, you do have compassion, but why it's painful to you, why it's unbearable, is because of your attachment and your anger not because of your compassion. And the only way to know this, because this is not the world's view of the mind, we have to understand this. This is a revelation when we get it. That's why compassion isn't enough. Your compassion is so limited if you still have attachment and aversion. Okay, we go one step at a time. Do you see my point, Maria? Monica?
Yes, I see it. So we need to like just keep going with the practice of lessening our afflictions, our
Of
own
course.
afflictions.
And
Okay.
as you lessen those, so you get more compassion, and they both grow together.
Okay, because I was hearing this part of the Hinayana path where well you just it is easier to forget about others actually, right? Well, easier
Okay, no, it's I mean,
somehow.
I don't want to say it like that. It's a bit too simplistic to put it this way. So what I'm
Okay.
getting at is this. The goal, first of all, you've got to, I mean, I'm not criticizing, it's just one of the paths in Buddhism. If you are on
Yes.
the Theravadan path, the teaching is that most people don't have the potential to be a Buddha. Most of us, all of us, do have the potential to achieve liberation from suffering, to achieve our own nirvana. And when we have achieved that nirvana, then when you die in that life, your mind has disappeared into a puff of smoke. You have ceased existing. And that's the main goal on that path. That's not the interpretation in the Prasangika Madhyamika and the Mahayana view. The Mahayana view is the mind can never end. The one point. And the second point is, it's obvious if you're on that path, you're an amazing person. You've given up attachment. You've given up anger. You've given up harming others. You've even, you've got incredible renunciation. So also think about it. You've also got incredible love and compassion. How could you not have love and compassion? How could you not have love and compassion if you don't have attachment and aversion? You'd be a blissfully loving, compassionate, amazing being. But because your goal is nirvana, when you die in that life, your goal overrides that compassion. Do you see my point? So it's not a question that they don't think of others. So it's a danger if you get renunciation first, and then renunciation you must have. But if you also get shamatha first and realize emptiness, it can be the danger that you will forget then if you're on the Mahayana path because you haven't got the bodhicitta. So as you get the bodhicitta first, then you get to get concentration later, along with the 6 perfections. Then there's no danger.
So starting then with bodhicitta, right?
What?
Oh, so then we need to start with bodhicitta.
What do you mean by start? But Monica, what do you mean by start? You start with a second scope. You start with renunciation, like I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, no, but what I mean is like what you were saying is that to not have this risk of disappearing in bliss.
No, there's no risk. No, that's not the right words, Monica. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You
Sorry.
don't disappear. No, you don't. Okay. You won't ever disappear. That's the Mahayana view. Your mind can't ever disappear.
Yes.
But you don't get carried away by the bliss if you've got compassion. You've really focused on compassion and focused on bodhicitta. Your main reason to even want to realize emptiness is because you've got compassion. The main reason that you only want to become a Buddha is because you've got compassion. That's really the point. So that you'll never lose the plot then. It's just all I'm getting at is the stages of the path on the Lamrim have this logic, Do you understand my point? We're communicating, right?
Yes, I think we do.
Good, Monica. Good, darling. Okay. Meanwhile, get
Thank
bliss,
you.
please. Get your bliss, honey child. No problem. Get delicious.
Yeah, because I think it is because in the society we live, where we are, especially the family I grew up with, sometimes it's like even you feel guilty if you just feel peaceful, It's like it's wrong. It's wrong to be happy. It's wrong to be.
This is the biggest problem in the West. We really don't understand renunciation properly. We really don't understand that it's all about wanting to be happy, wanting to stop suffering. We feel guilty. It's pathetic. It's really ridiculous, That's why commonly. Really that's why many people say, I've got compassion for others, but not for myself. It's really delusional, It means we haven't done the first stages properly.
But that happens a lot. I mean, it happened to me at the beginning.
I understand, darling. Keep moving.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah, okay. It's time to go, I think. So then next week we go to the Bodhisattva path and the 6 perfections, and we'll touch on concentration, emptiness as well again then. Okay, so thank you everybody for having me, all being together, all these thoughts, all these seeds we planted. Keep moving, keep keep moving, keep moving. Jang Trup Sem Chok Rinpoche, Ma Ke Param Ke Gu Chi Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Ho Ba Shu.
Ooh,
Okay. Thank you, darling, so much.